Okay, hey everybody. So we're going to be doing quick reviews of this. I think how I'm going to do it is I'm going to open up one or two of these and possibly a good one and a bad one, or just a couple of them that I just kind of see most notable. So I actually think these first two are really good. At this Buck Kid character, the reason I think this is good is because of this. You get a really nice line of action that goes through here, and then these limbs are kind of doing some interesting things here. Now I think that the fact that the ankle and the knee kind of coincide right there, I would maybe tweak that just a touch, but otherwise this is a really good pose. Let's go a little bit further forward here. This one's pretty good, but I think we're still getting a little bit of confusion about what's going on in here. And I think your line of action is actually pretty nice out through here. You got some nice stuff flowing around through here, and so we draw these like really sweepy lines through it. It's feeling good, but I think just all of these little things intertwining right in here, like you need to break it up just a touch. Maybe push this leg over a little bit in this direction. Push this leg over just a little bit in this direction, and then have that arm going between. I think little things like that you could probably punch it up just a touch. Alright, so this one's the one that I feel has a little bit more of an issue. I didn't really get the impression of what this was about. You get this nice line of action, but rather than have it flow out the foot, it kind of has this weird twist to it here. So rather than having this, you have this hiccup, and then it goes like that. And so I think that it's a good start, but I think it needs to kind of flow just a little bit more. Maybe even if you could just do it like that a little bit. So maybe just be like how this flows around the leg there. This just feels like a little bit of a hiccup to me in the line of action. And the feet feel like they're kind of bent weird too. Like this knee really feels to me like it should be pointed outward. Let's actually see if I got anything else. Looks pretty good. Probably amplify that back arc just a touch more. And this one feels a little stiff to me. Like it just doesn't feel very natural, or like that's what this pose would be. It feels just a little bit like it's kind of just stilted, if that makes sense. Like it doesn't really feel like that's the pose that a character would go into. Partially because it's so hard to hold. I would think it'd be more like collapsed down onto it, slumped over. I think it was devastated. This one's showing up really dark on my screen, but this is a really good pose, with the exception of this neck thing that is going on with most of the stuff with Willy. Has this weird, like, the head's doing that, the neck goes over, and then you get this line of action. So just cleaning that up a little bit. You also see it a lot in the arms. The arms are coming through like that, you know. And then to connect them, you get this awkward line there. And so if the arms were making this line and the head was making this line, I think that would actually look really good. And then you get these nice, interesting things kind of popping out here to sort of show the rest of the pose. So this just needs a couple little tweaks, but it would be really good then. Okay, let's go. So I'll be honest on this guy. I'm just having a hard time reading his emotions just overall. A couple of them I get that one is sad. Yet this one is kind of expectant or scared, mainly scared because of the eyebrows. And then this one seems kind of excited, maybe angry. I don't know. I'm going with that. And this is happy, I guess. I'm not sure what that one. It's like teetering. The problem with this is that he's just so hard to pose for emotion. You're getting some. They're actually when it comes to getting the emotion out of him, I'm not really getting that, but that's because he's just hard to pose for emotion. When it comes to the poses themselves, they're good poses for whatever emotion a baby dinosaur has. So it's kind of like the poses are working pretty well. This is actually a relatively good pose. Got some nice line of actions going through here. And this and so like some of these are good poses, but I'm having a hard time reading the emotions in them, so it's kind of hard to critique them for the emotion, but I can critique them like for the line of action, and I think this feels like a kind of natural line of action for a dinosaur. So I think overall it's pretty good, but this one would have been better if we could have used one of the characters that was actually a human, and that may be my fault for not specifying that. I can't remember which folder I told you to pull out of. So Ryan. Okay, I'm just going to kind of flip through them really quick. Okay, so this one has confused. The only thing that's really bothering me on this one, it's not really bothering me. This spine just feels perfect. Like, it just doesn't feel like you've really done much to it. And so I think you could amplify it a little bit. So if you have this maybe flowing a little nicer through here, right? And then this kind of dipping a little bit more like that, then maybe you would get a little bit more, let's see if I can get it, a little bit more like this shape. And so you get this, and then you get sort of this weight now over this leg. And so that maybe would sell a little bit. It just make that pose a little bit more dynamic. Right now, the biggest issue with it is it's just this feels kind of dull. Like there's not a lot going on in the spine. This one's funny as crazy. I think it's actually kind of funny. I feel like his mouth. This is going to sound nitpicky because he's a cartoon, right? But I feel like the corners of his mouth have kind of broken a little bit. It's just gone a little too high. But yeah, it's coming off as crazy. And the pose itself is actually pretty good. You got a pretty nice line of action flowing through here. And so I'm all right with this one. But I would say sort of play with the face and just make it seem like a little bit more like natural crazy. So let's see here. Again with the face on this one, I'm not really getting the emotion as much as like he's a little creepy, and that may just be because he's got these like purple eyes and this weird face. I think that we could improve this one though in a couple of ways. One, let's talk about silhouette. So this hand is kind of getting a little lost in this silhouette, whereas if you had done a little bit more like this. I'm just sort of blobbing it in there now. And then this side kind of pulled it in just a touch more as well. And then you get the body here. Like we get this maybe reads a touch clearer. So it's just this elbow kind of coming out and getting kind of lost in here. That just makes this a little harder to read. And you also got some interesting hip things going on there. You can see that they're both kind of leaning in one direction. I think that this hip may be a touch too low, because this feels like pretty extreme angle, and this feels almost flat. And so I think I would kind of push that hip back up and just kind of play with it a little bit more, just to sort of finesse some of that stuff in. I'm reading this one as I lost my keys, or my stomach's hurting because I just swallowed my keys. So one or two of those. Again, I think the face, you just kind of have to be careful how far you push the face, and how much you end up sort of tweaking in this to get the impression that you're going for. So this just feels a little too much. But otherwise, the pose is feeling pretty clean. Like I think this is just a good character to pose. You get a little bit of a too sharp of an angle on the wrist there, and so maybe pull that back a little bit. And the neck kind of also feels like it's dipping back just a little bit before it goes up. So just tweak those two little things. I think that would probably help a lot. So if this is scared as in he's running away, I would take this a little differently. So right now he's running away, but this foot is leading the motion and his hands are leading the motion. So if I looked at this from the side, I think what we're going to get is sort of like something like this, right? That this is kind of what we're looking at from the side. Instead, let's try it over here, and instead have his hips dragging everything else. Okay, so it looks like his hips are way out here in front, right? His head's back here, and he's doing like this. And so that looks like he's just trying to get his torso away from it. Like right now, it's like he's trying to zombie walk really, really fast away. So it's just pulling that butt in, so it's like whatever it is that's biting at him is not going to bite it off. I think that would really help this one as well. You get a lot of nice line of action stuff going through here, but it's really just kind of almost the placement of these feet that's doing most of it. So have the hips feel like they're leading that action. No comment. No, actually, as far as a pose goes, this is actually pretty good. The only thing I would say is maybe clean up these shoulders just a touch, and these hands just a touch. Like that finger just feels a little. This finger here just feels a little broken to me. I'm gonna change the size here. So when you get that, it just feels a touch too small. And so I think you could also beef this up a little bit by sort of playing with this S curve and maybe dipping the chest back a little bit more. But that's just me, and I'm not. I have to move on now. So overall, pretty good. Looking good. Okay, Peter. Poses. Going confused. A couple things. Got a little bit of crinkling going on your eyebrow there, and then I think so. We got the hips doing this, right? And so you're right to have sort of this contrapposto shoulders like that. The problem with that is because this shoulder is up, usually you raise your shoulder because you raise your arm up past a certain level. And so what we're getting is sort of a little disconnect between the flow of the arm here. So we get this flow through here, and then it just kind of stops and does that. And so that feels a little awkward to me. And so maybe what you would do is a little bit more like that. Like if that's kind of the shape you get. So you can just get a little bit more of this flow through the shoulders and down the arms. That and the brows are the only thing I would really say on that. You may be able to also do a little bit more in the spine. The spine feels a little bit stiff and straight, so just kind of playing around with that a little bit. As if this is like conniving, I think it's working. The face is looking pretty good. His knee, I always imagine his knees would be a touch. Like, why are his feet so close together? I would almost think his feet would be closer, or so far apart. I think his feet would almost be closer together. And so if we did it like this and thought of him like this pose, would that clarify it a little bit more? I think it probably would. I also think you got a little bit of weirdness going on here on the elbow, and that the elbow doesn't go out too far. And then so when we get to the wrist is sort of rotating forward a lot. So if we look at how our hands work, say this is our hand, right? We can rotate it forward and back, like if we're looking at it from the side, right? And this is our hand. We can rotate it this way quite a bit. We can twist it a relative amount too, but most of that twist happens in the forearm. But in this angle here, we do not have very much range of motion in that direction. So try to bend your hand that way. You do if you're going forward this way, like the pinky side is rotating forward. But when you're trying to bend your thumb back, it really kind of locks there. And that's because most of that is because the way your bones are built in your forearm. So that's why that feels like it's just rotating the thumb back a little too far. Not the thumb, but the thumb side of the hand is going back a little too far. So moving on. So sleepy. I feel like the hands are still feeling a little stiff, and maybe the same like elbow to wrist connection to make here. The biggest thing in this is like his torso just feels kind of straight, and so just think of what you could do with this if we were more like, you know, getting a little bit like that, like this sort of like roll in the back and chest rolling forward, and like this one just kind of a lot of straight lines going on in this one. So I think that we could really kind of clean this up and just make it more interesting just by keeping some of the stuff bent. Maybe get a little bit more of a flow through your arm here. Maybe get one knee up or something. I don't know. Like we could just kind of play with this one just to make it a little bit more interesting. This one's looking pretty good. Again, the eyebrows got a little bit of weirdness going on. I think I would consider pushing him over one leg here, so you get a little bit more like this leg's reaching and kind of off to one side. And got his head here like this. And so by doing that, you get a nicer line of action that goes all the way through it. So right now, this line of action is working. It could just be stronger. This makes sense. We could just push it a little bit more. Okay, and so is that all? Not really sure on that one, what that one is. This one, I'm guessing is... He seems scared. I'm gonna get these... The issue now is like how far forward this is versus where his arm is, so you may need to push that clavicle back. The hands are just feeling a little flat, like they feel a little too close to your bind pose. And the knees are feeling like they're stretched a little bit too much. So I think a lot of that you're going to be able to fix in some of the spine stuff, but I'm not really quite getting that quite as much. So I'm actually going to look in a little bit here and see what that one is. So I'm guessing I'm going for sort of like nervous or scared. So I think that's probably right. That close. There we go. Okay. Okay, this is actually pretty neat. We got a nice line of action going through here. The only main issues I would really note, I really like how it goes all the way out to the arm. This arm is kind of doing, it's like it's kind of getting these weird coincidental areas here that makes it kind of hard to read. So I wonder if this would work better instead of that, as if you had the arm kind of dipping forward like this or something, maybe even lower, coming forward and doing a little bit more like this. If this is the actual move and you're trying to get a very specific move, it may be the angle you're viewing it from. You may be able to twist a little bit more to the front. So it's just feeling like all of this right through here is feeling a little busy. So it makes sense, like where it's getting like, interacting here and here and here. All that just gets a little, like there's too many little things going on and your eye gets a little confused. Oh, that's good. I like that. I think you could really push this out just a little bit more, like really kind of bump this forward just a touch more, a little bit more like that. Oh, that's bad. A little bit more like, really push it back and really push his head back. You could, I guess I'd just say you could exaggerate it a touch more if you wanted to, but that's just very nitpicky stuff because for the most part that one's looking pretty good. This one's another one I think you could exaggerate a little bit more, have them slumped over a little bit more, head sort of dipping a little bit more, but otherwise looking pretty good. Well, this one's interesting because so we have this line of action. If we look at it, it's actually very it's kind of a weird shape, right? It doesn't feel like that should work because that goes that way, this goes that way, this goes this way. But you're actually kind of getting a nice feel out of this, and I think it's maybe that the character's trying to feel zigzaggy. You got the right thing going on with the shoulders, and then when you're cocking the head to the other side, I mean, there's nothing says you can't do that, but I think it's sort of risky at times, and you've pulled it off and still made it feel kind of symmetrical. So I actually think this one's working pretty well. Again, maybe consider playing around like, this kind of feels like what do you want? Like, why are you bothering me? Or maybe more like, ta-da. Okay, this one's feeling good too. These are good poses. Good line of action. I like this thing going on here. Let's pick a different color for you. Some different stuff going on here. Good line of action. I like this thing going on here and this knee going on here. Maybe consider turning that one way or the other because it just makes this feel shortened. And so whenever you have something bent, you never want to look at it directly from the angle it is bending toward, because if you do, you're just going to see it as a straight line, right? So I don't want to say never, but usually even if you just go off to one side a little bit and get just a touch of the bend in there, so whether it be this way or this way, just to get a touch of that bend in there, just to see what is clarifying it. The other thing I would say is I feel like this arm needs to be around a little bit further forward. So even if it just means twisting the upper torso so this shoulder comes forward, because if you do that, then the shoulder will be starting here, and I think you get this arm a little further out here, and I think that would really help that one. This one's a weird one for emotion because he always kind of looks like he's smiling to me, and this does not feel like smiling. This feels like he's trying to avoid getting hit. Got some pretty nice posing going on everything right through here, this arm feels a touch stiff on how it's like kind of hooked in there and kind of how far the elbow's out. And then when we get these two lines of the legs kind of crisscrossing and blocking each other, and a little bit of confusing stuff going on in the hips here, I think we could kind of tweak those a little bit. As far as line of action goes, it's not very strong. It's all like kind of straight down, so we could always push that a little bit, even if it's pushing the hips forward and getting just a little bit more like a little bit more curve to it, so you get like maybe more like this shape going on with it. So even if you get a little bit of that, and then that way this leg is kind of coming down at an angle more, and so you may be able to do a little bit of something like that, tuck that elbow down just a touch, but otherwise that one's looking pretty good too. So punch, okay. Where are we at now? There we go. Herschel. Okay. My comment on this one is it's a little just straight on. It's a little vanilla. Like that's straight. That's straight. Although I think his shoulder's kind of broken right in there a little bit. But it feels like everything's just kind of level and straight all the way down, if that makes sense. So I think, and then you've got a curve that goes through here, but it's just feeling a little too symmetrical. So in animation, we have something that we call twinning. So you have a character standing here, right? And he's kind of giving this open arm gesture, and so the hands are doing something like this. Sometimes people will do the exact same thing with the other hand, and that's called twinning. And like those motions happen at the same time, and they're going almost to the same exact spot. You just kind of want to break that up a little bit. So instead, we have the character standing here. Maybe one arm is doing this, while the other is more like this, right? And so this just kind of breaks it up and makes it a little bit more symmetrical. And so I think that's what's going on here. I think that we got a little bit too much twinning going on everything. The legs feel, and that happens when you get, some kind of straight lines going on there. It's just easy to make it feel too symmetrical. So I think just breaking up some of the symmetry in there will really help. A little bit of the same thing on this one. We got, some of these straight lines going across. I think that that's all right if they're straight, but maybe just play with interesting ways of showing this. Maybe you show us a little lower, and if you're showing this pose from a little lower, let me see if I can do a lower pose of this, and it kind of feels like he's, got, these arms going like this, and these big feet down here. Maybe this we can make feel a little bit more interesting now. I also think that, again, his torso is kind of linear there, so I think really just kind of pushing the hips over a little bit, maybe something like this, really bending that spine back even more, and maybe even just showing us slightly from the side, like something like maybe like this. It's alright for this one to twin, I think, because of the way you're doing it, but I think just doing a little bit of something like that maybe would help a little bit. I'm using the phrase a little bit a lot today. Using a little bit a lot. Okay, so this one, I feel like he's looking at something like in this direction, right? And kind of starting to run away from it, so I'm not really getting the emotion, but the fact that he's kind of running it, like this is just kind of showing it from an odd angle to me. So if we were looking at it from a different angle, and there's something over here, and he's running at it this way, and then maybe what we would see in the pose is a little bit more of him leaning to that side and pushing off, and like starting to, this arm getting in front of him, and and that one's not going. The other one's like kind of going back behind him, and he's looking this way. I think we could kind of tweak with that a little bit to make it a little bit more interesting. But right now when we look at it, it's just kind of this. And then these areas get a little confusing and not very clear when it comes to silhouette. So I'd work with that just a touch. Kind of think if that's really the best angle to be showing this from. Okay, so here's another issue where I think we can really break up the symmetry of it. So we got, not symmetry as much as the symmetrical part of the torso. So instead of doing it like that, what if we really just push this? Like we really push this angle, because like if we go through the arms now, the arms do that, right? So what if we wanted something more like, more flowy, like this in the arms? Okay, so drawing this really powerful line. And then the same in the spine, we want something a little bit more like, maybe like this, okay? And so then you get this foot that's down here, the spine that's really kind of pushing that, this knee that kind of pulls up here. So we get like, so I'm going to draw that foot. So you get a little bit more like this. And so maybe that reads just a little bit more as like hooray. So if we look at that now, if we draw these two lines through this, you'll see that here we get these countering angles on the hips and shoulders. And then, you know, these nice line of actions that go through both of them, like this and this. And so, like, you know, just kind of that. I know it's a tangled mess of lines, but you get the idea of what I'm kind of going for there. So again, a little bit too much twinning, a little bit too much symmetry. So again, straight. You get a little bit of a cock to the head. And then the arms are very similar. And kind of the legs are similar too. The knees kind of aiming in the same direction, even though the feet are kind of out. So I think this one could really just be improved overall. Just how can I really show this, like, I don't know, feel to it. So even though I'm reading it, I think it could be stronger to sell that emotion. Here, I think just be careful about what's getting confusing. Like, this section here feels a little confusing just because so many things are interacting right there. I don't know exactly, I don't know if I can even really explain why. But just by like rotating this knee out and this foot over a little bit, and then you kind of end up with a little bit more of, let's see if I can draw it here. I'm drawing very, very clumsily here. Knee up, and then this knee kind of out here. This arm back holding them up, and then maybe tuck or bring that elbow out just a little bit more. And so, like, if it's something a little bit more like that, or this is kind of rotating out, and we're seeing, I don't know, this just feels like this whole section right through here just feels a little awkward to me. And then the fact that I can see the elbow starting to peek out, like around here, and the shoulder, like it just feels like you could pull that forward a little bit more to kind of make it maybe a little bit more like this instead. And I'm reading this as I'm just sitting around in the grass, like checking out his fingernails, kind of bored. Okay, let's move on. Come on, there we go. Okay, there we go. So nice. But then I feel like his weight's kind of over the wrong foot. It feels like his weight's over this way a little too far. And then this is just feeling a little confusing. So if we were to just look at this as silhouette, just black everything out except for the body shape, this area here just turns into kind of a tangle of limbs. So I think you really need to kind of think about how to clean that up. Maybe if you're more like this and this as the hands, and then the head and the body through here, all over top of this leg. Sorry, this is super sketchy. So you get that idea of like just kind of clearing that up a little bit. You may be able to just get a cleaner and nicer silhouette that we can see a little bit better. Excuse me, yawning. Here as well, maybe we can just show this from a slightly better angle. I think you're getting a pretty nice line of action through here, but I think you could get it stronger. Like if instead it were starting with the foot back here, you know, the body like this, the head like this arm really straight out here, this arm tucked back, and this one kind of forward. Like just something like that, you may be able to get that feeling a little more. Then you get this more of this energy that kind of flows out through here, and so you can even emphasize that as well. Do you want the line of action to go like this, or do you want the line of action to go like this and come out the tip of his finger? And if so, then you even push it even more. Character like what am I doing? It's not right. The character's head here, and the body really leaning forward, but this arm just really pointing out this way. And so just kind of playing around with this to kind of get the, the pointing there, and the elbow. This is a really bad drawing to explain this. Really getting this strong arm coming up through there, and then getting this flow all the way from the foot. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can kind of play with that to make that stronger and just push it and push it. But I think that right now it's kind of vertical, and I think you're going to want more of that energy moving forward. I'm reading this as bored or reluctant or skeptical. So again, we talked about this a little bit. I guess some like straight lines there. I think we can just really amplify that with some angles. Maybe shift the weight over this leg a little bit more. That way this leg's kind of pushing them off. A little bit more like that, like this, and then just selling it in the face a little bit more. Like that's. But I think it's it's not an extremely successful emotional pose in the body. I think the face is kind of selling a lot of this, and so some poses are just like that. Part of the expression is just that the character is just disinterested or something like that. Okay, so here's one where when I see these, I just see I kind of look for things that feel like it's breaking the way the body is built. So I'm looking here at the elbow. If I take my hand up to scratch my head, this elbow feels like it's bending backwards. I'm not sure it is, but I think you can just clarify that arm a little bit more like that, right? And the same here, this kind of goes out. It's got a nice bend there, but then look how tight that's bent forward. Like that's a really sharp angle that goes all the way around there. On top of that, the character's weight is on this leg, right? And then the hips are like that, and then these shoulders are kind of straight. And so I think if the weight's on this leg, that means the weight's not on this side of the body, right? The weight should be, being supported by sort of this angle, but look how much weight is still over here on this side. So I think to do that, like if the weight is on this leg and that hip is up, then you really kind of have to push the character's weight kind of over to this side. That's probably more than that's too much, but you get the idea there. And then the other thing is, if the hips are doing that, then this should be doing this. And so right now, the hips are doing that, but then this is straight. And so this is just kind of the biggest thing on this is really kind of a bad flow all the way through this. So it makes sense like that's just really not a nice line of action or flow through that. Let's move on here. This one's feeling a little better. I like this. Shoulders are feeling just a touch stiff, and I'm losing some stuff in here, but mainly that's because of the lighting. So I think you could roll the shoulder forward a little bit on this to make it feel like he's drooping a little bit. I'm reading this as sad or confused. Maybe a little of both, like disappointed and confused about something. That one's completely surprised. And I'm reading that, again, I think the shoulders can be rolled forward a little bit, just because that feels particularly stiff there. I think this line of action is working. It's kind of a boring angle, not because of what we're seeing, but more just because it's like a profile view. It's almost too perfectly to the side. So I think rotating around just a touch to the front would help that. Okay, I think we already looked at that one. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and stop this one now, and I'll come back at this point and wrap up the rest of them. So.